Let's get started. In this video, we're going to look at 5 distinct ways that you can reduce your string noise on the guitar. I do want to acknowledge, though, right from the outset, that string noise is part of our instrument. It's part of our musical world. And if we wanted to have a perfect sound every time we played a note, then maybe we'd be playing another instrument. But we're playing the guitar, and string noise is part of that world. What we really want to do, though, is make sure that the noise itself of our fingers moving along the strings, in particular the bass strings, doesn't get in the way of the music, doesn't distract us from what's happening in the music. So a beautiful lyrical passage like this should really be left free of some of those noises so we can focus on the beautiful melody that is Lagrima. So that's what we're going to look at in this video. Let's start with number 1. The first technique I want to look at is that of lift and shift. And what we're doing with our left hand here is, instead of playing a note and dragging it along the string as we go between notes, rather we play the note, lift straight up, move the hand, shift, and go down. Play the next note. This eliminates the movement that causes the noise in the first place. The movement is that of the finger dragging along the string. Now, it's a little more challenging than it sounds, because when you lift, you're obviously going to create a break in the sound. And one of the things we're constantly working towards is creating legato, connected notes on the guitar, so it sings. So this technique is going to need to be worked on so that it's agile and quick and doesn't disrupt the music. There's always going to be a little bit of a break between notes on the guitar anyway. There's no way around that. Even our right hand will be stopping the string for just a fraction of a second as we play through it. And so we're working always to minimize that break in sound. The second challenge is the release of the hand as it lifts, because you can lift straight up. You're going to hear the string ringing open, but you can lift straight up and you won't hear that squeaking sound. If you're moving somewhere, however, if you're going further up the fretboard, there's often the tendency to still have a bit of a scooped exit from that note. And so that travel of the finger, instead of going straight up, it actually travels along the string and still causes some of that string noise. So the second challenge is really to go straight up, to lift your finger straight up, perpendicular from the fingerboard, shift, and then straight down. Otherwise, you're still going to get those shifting noises. So that is technique number 1, lift and shift. The second technique is the same idea. However, we're looking at a situation where we have fingers down on some of the treble strings. Now, as I mentioned, it's the bass strings that cause us the most grief because they have the wound metal over the silk. But the treble strings, being nylon, cause a little bit of sound as you travel along them, but in comparison, very little. So if we have something like Lagrima, we can still maintain contact with the string on the treble string if we have a note on the bass and then the treble. So we can use it as a guide finger to have stability in the hand, and in this case have the connection in the melody, and then lift in the bass, shift, lift in the bass and shift, lift and shift. And I think the music benefits from the removal of the string noise, and it doesn't suffer that much from the slight disconnect between the notes. Another good example there might be prelude number 4, of Villalobos. Here it's very easy to get a lot of string noise going up and down the 4th string there, but we do have the other 2 notes, one on an open string but 2 notes on treble strings, and so we can shift with contact there to keep our stability and our sense of guidance from those guide fingers, but we're lifting the bass notes off that 4th string. So the lift and shift technique, along with guide fingers on the treble strings, works really, really well. The third approach, which can reduce string noise on the guitar, is refingering a passage in the left hand. As we're using Lagrima as an example, when I was trying to exaggerate the sound in the introduction of this video, what I did is I took the first finger and I shifted every single time with the first finger. And in doing so, you're dragging that finger. And if you try the lift and shift, it's hard because it's always the same finger, up and up, up and down, up and down. However, if you refingered that passage as an example, 1 on the 4th string, and then instead of doing 1 and 4, which might feel obvious, we can lift and then use the 2nd finger. So we've already eliminated one of the challenging lift and shift movements here because we're using different fingers. The next one, I do use the 2nd finger again, so we'll have to use that lift and shift along with the guide fingers. But refingering a passage in the left hand to try and give you the best setup to not have the finger noise in the first place is a great way to approach it. So consider looking at different fingering options if there's a passage that's really having an issue with string noise. The fourth approach is an interesting one, probably the one that people consider the least, but that is about your fingertips. And there's a number of things we can think of here. I think one is the type of skin you have, and what I mean by that is that some of us have sweaty skin, some have dry skin, and everything in between. And also we have calluses that build up on our fingers as well. So the skin you have on your fingers could be changed a little bit. Some people actually file down calluses on their fingertips. Some people might use oil to soften the skin on their fingertips. So those might change the situation a little bit. But I think the most practical aspect is actually changing the position or the placement of your fingertips in the left hand as they fall on the bass strings. So an exercise here I think that is really useful is trying to exaggerate your string noise. How loud can you make it? And in that process, you're really finding out what part of the fingertip makes it the most prominent. And for me, it's really on the very, very tip. That's where I get it. If I put it on the pad of the finger, oops, that's the 3rd string, it's a very different type of string noise. It's still there, but it's nowhere near as aggressive and as disruptive. So first of all, making sure it's not on the loudest position point of the fingertip. But also if you're going to have a shift, maybe you want to turn intentionally the fingertip so you're on more of the pad of the finger. This might go against your original training as a guitarist where they say play right on the fingertips, but it really works. A good example passage here is from Villa-Lobos Prelude 1. The reason there's so many good examples from Villa-Lobos is he likes to shift shapes, move shapes around the fingerboard. Anyway, so we've got this diminished 7 chord, and if we exaggerate it, that's right on the tip of my index finger. But if I collapse that finger and put it more on the pad of the finger, it somewhat magically disappears. So it's a really impactful aspect. This is where the lift and shift maybe is not that practical because this passage gets quite fast. The other aspect of this is very counterintuitive, and that is if you've gone through the exaggeration exercise, trying to make the most loud squeak on the strings, you probably found that you have to use a very light touch. Very light on the fingers and right on the tips of the fingers. But if you put more pressure than normal, we get a bit more of a portamento or glissando type sound, but it's not a squeak. So that's an interesting way to use pressure, a little bit more pressure on the finger. Watch the turn. So I'm turning, angling off the tip of the finger, and I'm increasing the pressure, getting a bit of a portamento there. It's not always going to be appropriate for a musical style. Maybe it won't work in Renaissance or Baroque music, for instance. But if the shoe fits, then you can use that as an option. Finally, we can look at a couple of things that still are impactful, but maybe a little bit less practical. And that's to do with your strings themselves. So the first thing is I've got a new set of strings on here intentionally to try and make sure that the string noises are nice and clear. But waiting just a day or two for your fingers to get the strings sounding a little less bright. Normally we're looking for a nice bright sound, but if you're really getting annoyed by string noise, just give it a couple of days and actually your string noise will be reduced when your strings age a little bit. But if you're recording and you really need to reduce the sound of the string noise and you don't want to change your technique or you don't want to use slightly older strings, you can use what is called polished strings. These are strings that are created with wound metal, but they actually in the workshop have been polished so that we lose this serrated edge that causes such a loud noise. These strings sound a little different, they feel a little different, but they do reduce the string noise while still being very new strings. So that could be an option you might want to explore just out of curiosity, if for nothing else. And they are called polished or semi-polished strings. I hope this has provided some ways for you to reduce or minimize your string noise. Just remember not to get too caught up in all of these sounds. They're part of our instrument, but we're focusing here on reducing it so the music can shine. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon. Bye.